I never imagined that a quiet Saturday afternoon in my own backyard could turn into the moment everything I'd built came crashing down. I'm Emily Johnson, a 30-year-old digital strategist living in Seattle, Washington, and it all started at what should have been a harmless end-of-summer BBQ. The sun was dipping behind the pines, my white wicker table gleamed under string lights, and I had just poured myself a glass of Pinot Noir when disaster struck. That single careless spill of deep red wine not only stained the new tablecloth but somehow seemed to stain my reputation too. As laughter and clinking glasses filled the air, I caught sight of Andrew, my colleague, smiling with two knowing eyes. He lifted his phone as if about to share something that would change everything. My heart pounded. I tried to brush it off. It's just a stupid stain, I told myself. But inside, a nagging voice whispered that this wasn't about a tablecloth, and in that charged moment, I realized the worst was still to come. When I close my eyes, I'm instantly transported back to a crisp November morning in Bellevue, Washington. I can still smell the comforting blend of cinnamon, nutmeg, and roasting turkey that always seemed to herald the start of the holiday season at my grandparents' house. I was 8 years old then, small enough to perch on a stool beside Grandma's harvest orange formica counter, watching her glide around the kitchen in a faded floral apron, humming an old jazz tune from the radio. My grandparents' home sat on a quiet cul-de-sac, lined with maple trees that spilled their fiery red and gold leaves across the front lawn. In late October, the air carried a gentle chill that made your cheeks rosy and your breath visible in little puffs every time you spoke. As kids from the neighborhood kicked crunchy leaves around, Grandma would beckon us inside. "Temperature's perfect for a cup of hot cider," she'd call, ladling out mugs glazed with steam. I remember Grandpa's workshop just off the garage. Its door always cracked open, revealing sawdust-covered floors and the soft scent of pine. He'd been a high school woodshop teacher for over 30 years before retiring, and his pride and joy was his old Craftsman bandsaw. He'd let me help hammer in tiny finishing nails or sand the edges of a birdhouse he was making for the neighborhood garden club. He was patient, guiding my small hand with his large calloused one, teaching me to feel the grain of the wood, how to push just enough pressure to leave a smooth finish without gouging. "A craftsman respects the material," he'd say, his voice low and steady. But the real magic happened inside the house, where every detail whispered home. The dining table was a solid cherrywood heirloom, polished until I could see my reflection in the deep varnish. We'd all squeeze around it, Grandma at the head of the table, Grandpa at the other, and my parents beside them. My older brother Michael would crack jokes about how Grandma's mashed potatoes could give any five-star restaurant a run for its money. She'd just laugh, her eyes crinkling at the corners, and wave him off, told him to save his appetite for dessert. Dessert, of course, was almost a spectacle itself. Pie cooling on the windowsill, pumpkin with its delicate lattice crust, apple sprinkled with just enough turbinado sugar to sparkle, and pecan pie so glossy you could almost see your face in its glaze. I still taste that first bite of warm pumpkin pie, the way the spices rolled over my tongue, balanced by the cool whipped cream that melted like fresh fallen snow. It wasn't just the food that made those moments glow in my memory. It was the stories we shared. Grandpa would recount tales from his high school coaching days, how he led his football team to a state championship in '82, how he once had to sew up a student's uniform with dental floss backstage at a regional meet. My parents would tease each other about college pranks, and Michael would theatrically mimic our dad's signature baritone laugh. Even my younger cousin Lily would chime in with her exuberant declarations about spotting the biggest pumpkin at the farm that year. In those moments, it felt like the world outside Bellevue didn't exist, the way it often felt in childhood. No deadlines looming, no worries about performance reviews or client pitches. The centerpiece of our universe was that table, groaning under the weight of Grandma's casserole dishes, flickering candlelight dancing on polished glassware, and the soft strains of Sinatra drifting through the speakers. Every clink of silverware, every shared smile, wove a tapestry of belonging that I didn't yet realize would become the foundation of who I am today. That sense of belonging carried into my teenage years, too. Even when I went off to the University of Washington, brimming with excitement and self-doubt in equal measure, I'd come home every break and find that same cocoon of acceptance. My grandparents didn't care if I'd aced or bombed my midterms. They wanted to know if I'd eaten enough, if I'd seen any good sunsets, if I'd made any new friends. And Grandma's hugs had an uncanny power to chase away homesickness, better than any care package could. I can still feel the warmth of her embrace when I faced my first real setback. It was sophomore year, and I'd stayed up all night preparing for a digital marketing case competition. I thought I had the winning concept, but when the judges delivered their feedback, it felt like they'd dunked me in ice water. Too generic, too predictable, not enough data to back up my projections. I trudged back to my dorm room, tears stinging my eyes, convinced I'd let everyone down. The next morning, Grandma called. "Sweetheart, I heard you got some tough feedback. I want you to remember, scratches in your vase don't ruin its beauty, they give it character. Learn from it, polish it, and show the world the radiant heart within." I scribbled her words on a sticky note and plastered them above my desk. They became my mantra through countless presentations after that. Looking back, I see how those warm, unguarded years shaped my approach to life and work. I learned resilience at Grandpa's workbench, patience in Grandma's kitchen, and empathy at that cherry wood table where every voice mattered. Those holidays in Bellevue taught me the power of shared experience, how a simple meal could become a vessel for understanding, healing, and belonging. So when I think about the backyard BBQ that went sideways last week, I don't just see a wine stain on a tablecloth. I see everything I've ever built on the shoulders of those early memories. The confidence to host, the creativity to plan the menu from scratch, the drive to cultivate relationships, both personal and professional, that make gatherings meaningful. Most importantly, I carry with me the reminder that no matter how far I roam, there's always a table set for me somewhere, waiting with smells and sounds and stories that say, "You belong." Do you remember your warmest memory around a family table? Maybe it was a holiday gathering, a birthday cake with flickering candles, or even a simple Sunday brunch. Hold on to that feeling, because it's the same one that fuels me as I navigate the storm that's about to break. Just a few days after the barbecue, I still felt unsettled. Everything seemed back to normal. The ad campaign report I presented to our Fortune 500 client showed a 120% return on investment, and my inbox no longer held any strange messages. But inside, I found myself holding my breath, waiting for something to happen. It all began with a message at 8:17 on Monday morning. I was sipping my cold brew coffee and hitting reply all to lock in deadlines for the team when my phone buzzed. "Emily, I just found the 30-slide demo for the Axiom pitch. Can you meet me at Starbucks downtown at 6 p.m.? Andrew is a longtime colleague, my go-to collaborator on the digital creative team. I was curious but not suspicious. He must have an update for our slide deck, I told myself. That evening, I stopped by the Starbucks on the corner of Hamilton and 4th Avenue. He was already there, latte in hand. When I glanced at his laptop, I realized the file wasn't ours. The first slide read, "Secret Proposal V2, with our rival company's logo in the corner." "I found it in the shared folder," Andrew said softly, though his eyes sparkled. Not sure if it's related to the revivalware project you've been working on. My heart started racing. Revivalware, the sustainable fashion startup my team and I had just secured $50,000 in seed funding for, was my passion project for the last 6 months. I replied vaguely, "No, I didn't work on that," while inwardly wondering how that file ended up in my directory. The next day, I checked my internal email and discovered a hidden thread visible only to Andrew, titled Emily_J_confidential. I knew I shouldn't open it, but curiosity got the best of me. It was a 10-page draft contract from GeForce Technologies, pledging $75,000 for the marketing solution I proposed. At the bottom was a note, pending higher-level approval before sending to Emily. A chill ran down my spine. If they trusted me, why hide the information? Part of me thought maybe leadership is weighing multiple options, but another part whispered, they don't want me to know. Then Michael, my brother, started acting strangely too. On our family call Wednesday evening, his voice sounded thin. Instead of his usual update on supervising construction materials in Portland, he mumbled a few words and handed the phone to our mother. Mom quickly said, "He's busy, he'll call back tomorrow afternoon." But I remembered him telling me he'd leave early to see the new animated film premiere at Cinerama with me. I asked, "What's going on, Mike?" He dodged the question. "Don't worry, sis, everything's fine." Before I could press further, he hung up. For the first time, I felt a gulf between us, a distance no phone call could bridge. Thursday night, while I was finalizing slides for the Revivalware presentation to secure $150,000 in Series A funding, I received an email from internal@company.com, an address not in my contacts. The subject read, Project Revivalware. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single line and a 2.1 megabyte PDF attachment. Emily, review the marketing plan. Several risks remain uncontrolled. See the attached internal assessment. I downloaded the report and skimmed dozens of pages of competitor analysis I hadn't approved. One recommendation stood out. Shift 25% more of our remarketing budget to Facebook instead of Google Ads, completely different from the slide deck I'd prepared. I wondered, who sent this? Was Andrew trying to sabotage me, or was someone else maneuvering behind the scenes to replace me? That weekend, back home, I noticed footprints outside my living room window. My heart pounded. I turned off the lights and peered through a crack. No one was there. Yet someone had clearly tried to break in. I grabbed my phone to call the police, then paused, thinking, maybe it was just a stray animal. I'm being paranoid. But my sensitivity wasn't unfounded. I flashed back to Claire Donovan's gaze during yesterday's budget approval meeting, when I requested an additional $25,000 for Instagram ads. She nodded. We'll review it, but her eyes betrayed a tight-lipped smile, as if this were all part of a bigger performance. The investment closing date was fast approaching. I had to present projected ROI figures and propose allocating $350,000 across a multi-channel campaign. Everything was ready, except the question, was someone inside the company deliberately undermining my project? I started staying up later, double-checking every line of tracking pixel code, and rerunning A/B test simulations. Night after night I worked until 2 a.m., dark circles under my eyes and hands shaking over the keyboard. But the clearer sign came on the day of my presentation, as I stepped onto the stage in the 22nd floor boardroom at Bellevue Tower. I noticed on slide 10, the one detailing gross profit, the numbers had vanished. Instead of gross margin 58%, a single dash appeared. I swallowed hard, clicked the remote to reload. The screen flickered and displayed, "File missing." The room went silent. Claire Donovan furrowed her brow, glanced at her phone, then fixed her gaze on me with a steely expression. In that moment, I felt as if I were on a slippery ledge, about to fall. The audience's collective breath hung in the air. All my late-night work, every meticulously crafted figure, seemed to evaporate. And then I knew, this wasn't a technical glitch. It was intentional. Someone had tampered with my file to prevent me from sharing results and inspiring investors. Someone wanted to see me fail. Yet, amid the chaos, another truth emerged. I refused to be defeated. I took a deep breath, met the CEO's eyes, and said, "I apologize for the inconvenience, but I came prepared with an offline copy." I pulled a USB drive from my blazer pocket, plugged it in, and resumed my presentation. My voice was steady, unwavering. I had practiced 50 times in front of the mirror, and in that moment it paid off. I glanced down at the front row. Andrew gave me a subtle nod and an encouraging smile, as if to say, "You've got this." Michael stood in the back corner of the room, camera in hand, his expression serious but supportive. The signs of trouble were undeniable: hidden messages, secret reports, and now a deliberate technical sabotage. I realized I was under attack, but those very threats ignited a new strength within me, the resolve not only to overcome my saboteur, but to prove my true worth. And so began a series of trials where I would confront not just those closest to me but also the fears lurking within myself. I never imagined an internal meeting could become the turning point of my career. That Tuesday, June 10th, I walked into the boardroom on the 22nd floor of Bellevue Tower, the site of countless successful pitches. The projector was primed, the gray leather chairs arranged in a U-shape, and the polished walnut podium waiting for me to captivate potential investors. At the head of the table sat Claire Donovan, our powerful CEO, always clad in sharp business attire with a steely gaze. Beside her were 4 board members, 2 of whom were former finance experts from Goldman Sachs. The room was so quiet I could hear the ticking of the wall clock. I thought of the $75,000 GeForce Technologies had once promised, and the countless sleepless nights I poured into that 30-page proposal. Each page meticulously detailed with data analyses, advertising roadmaps, and line-deep KPIs down to the last cent. "Let's get started, Emily," Claire said, her voice warm yet terse. Just the word "started" was enough to send my excitement spiraling into utter tension. I stepped up to the podium and adjusted the microphone. "Thank you all for being here. I'm very excited to present the results of our multi-channel campaign simulation for Revivalware. With an anticipated 180% return on investment in the first 6 months. The first slide appeared on the screen. A line chart projecting first-month revenue of $45,000 and a gross margin of 58%. Figures I'd validated through A/B testing with 5,000 prospective customers. Before I could elaborate, Claire raised her hand to signal stop. The screen flickered, then slides 3, 4, and 5 all turned into bold red dashes. When I clicked to advance, every slide was blank. I felt my temples throb. "I'm sorry," I stammered, fumbling with the remote, but the only sound in the room was my own echo and the bewildered gazes of the board members fixed on me. Claire shrugged, her tone ice-cold. "Emily, I've received an unauthorized internal report on Project Revivalware. Did you edit these slides yourself?" She held up a 10-page contract, each page dated June 8th and signed C. Donovan at the bottom. The description clearly stated that G-Force Technologies had agreed to pay $75,000 for the advertising services I proposed. My chest tightened. "No," I replied quickly, my hand trembling as I lifted the report I'd prepared on USB drive. "This is the official version." I printed it and brought it with me. Claire nodded, but her smile was like a sharpened blade. "Then explain why I knew nothing about this contract, and why it was hidden in the Emily_J_confidential folder without following the approval process." The boardroom went completely silent. I took a deep breath, struggling for composure. The contract I saw last week was an internal draft. As per policy, I was waiting for final sign-off before sending anything to the client. I never disclosed any details externally. One board member, Mr. Bennett, the thin salt-and-pepper-head man in wire-rimmed glasses, narrowed his eyes. "Then explain why this $75,000 line item was already in a formal contract, and who forged C. Donovan's signature." My heart pounded. I knew that if I didn't find a loophole fast, I'd become the scapegoat. "I don't know," I admitted, voice cracking. "Someone may have forged her signature or sent the document to discredit me." Claire cleared her throat and curled her lip. "How convenient to blame a shadowy saboteur. The reality is that the $75,000 project is cancelled. And can I trust you with the upcoming $150,000 Series A contract when you've repeatedly leaked sensitive information?" She tapped her laser pointer on the table. "I'm officially terminating Project Revival Ware. The $75,000 budget will be reallocated to another team. Effective immediately, you're barred from accessing any internal documents until our investigation concludes." A soft "oh" rippled through the room. My face burned, my whole body trembled. Months of planning with designers, developers, and data analysts had gone straight into the trash. I fought back tears. "Please let me explain fully." But Claire turned her back, switching the screen to the final slide. Project termination notice. When the meeting ended, HR escort Marta, wearing a People and Culture badge, handed me a reassignment notice. "You'll be moved to customer support for the next 30 days. In the deserted hallway, I paused and placed my hand on the glass wall, staring down at the endless stream of cars below. The sun was high now, glaring off the windows. I thought back to Andrew's encouraging nod last week. Now he stood across the room, eyes downcast. Michael ignored my "Are you okay?" texts. I clutched the notice, vision blurring. The $150,000 Series A plan was in tatters. My dream role as a digital strategist felt like it was slipping away. My heart shattered, but a flicker of my grandmother's lesson burned inside me. "Scratches in your vase don't ruin its beauty." I gripped the paper and inhaled deeply. They could steal the contract, hide documents, and falsely accuse me, but they couldn't take away my confidence or my talent. In that moment, I realized this betrayal wasn't just about canceling a project. It was a punch to my honor and trust. Claire, someone I thought I could rely on, had ripped up that 10-page contract right in front of me, just as she'd torn apart all my hard work. I walked out of the building with "session terminated" still ringing in my ears, pain piercing me like 1,000 blades. My USB drive was still in my blazer, proof that I'd come prepared. I vowed not to let it become useless. Because the real turning point wasn't the loss of $75,000. It was the end of the role I'd built. I knew the days ahead would be a fierce fight. To clear my name, to reclaim the project, and most importantly, to not lose myself. That night at 2 a.m., I drove down Interstate 5 under bare streetlights, the asphalt stretching endlessly. Despair weighed on me like a boulder, each breath a struggle. The cold wind drifted through the cracked window, but it couldn't cool my raging thoughts. When I exited the highway into a blinking gas station forecourt, I parked beside a pump and sat there, the neon sign open 24/7 buzzing overhead. I turned off the engine and let silence envelop me. The only other sound was the hum of the sign and the loneliness that pressed in from every direction. In that emptiness, everything felt meaningless. They'd stolen my $75,000 contract, crushed my 6 months of effort, and stripped me of my central role. The betrayal was more than failure. It was the horror of realizing people I trusted could stab me in the back. I thought of Claire Donovan's cold eyes when she tore up the contract. I remembered the board's collective sigh, as though interrogating me for a grave crime. I felt the humiliation when HR handed me the support role reassignment. In that instant, I felt invisible, my work as worthless as scraps of paper. I touched the steering wheel, feeling its textured leather under my fingertips. Then I recalled the night before I left home. I'd neatly packed a few outfits into a carry-on for a trip to Portland. I teased Michael. "Did you remember the little cactus on my desk?" He'd said. "I'll keep it safe. Next time you come home, you'll have a bit of home waiting for you." Now I knew that home was as fragile as a delicate trinket. I believed family, colleagues, and the company were my steadfast anchor, but that anchor had turned to shifting sand. I collapsed into my arms on the steering wheel and cried until my voice gave out. My tears weren't just for the job I lost. They were for the fear that gnawed at me. If I'm not the capable Emily Johnson, who am I? I wasn't sure I could get back up. Eventually, I wept for the helplessness that made me doubt myself. My marketing degree from UW, last year's campaign award, the glowing performance reviews, they all seemed meaningless now. Had I been holding myself together too tightly, only to shatter completely? Time felt frozen. I lifted my head and looked through the windshield smeared with condensation. Night mist clung to the glass, but my vision remained blurred by tears. I saw the yellow glow of a floodlight reflecting on the wet pavement. I wiped the window and closed my eyes, letting my mind clear for a few precious seconds. The engine noise faded when I pulled the key and stepped out. The gas station air was bone-chilling. Gusts cut through my thin jacket and numbed my hands. I sat on the curb, back against the tire, hugging my knees and burying my face in my arms. Exhaustion overwhelmed me. My throat felt like it had swallowed a stone. I couldn't cry or scream anymore. I remembered Grandma's words, "Scratches in your vase, don't ruin its beauty." But right then I felt the vase was shattered beyond repair. I wondered if anything could save me now. In my daze, I noticed my leather shoes, the one thing I'd felt proud of all week, were splattered with mud from stepping out. I looked down, my hand trembling as I brushed the soil away, bit by bit. It seemed pointless, yet it was the only way I could remind myself. I still had the will to clean, to start over. When I raised my head, headlights from a passing semi glided by in the distance. I squinted through fatigue but saw nothing unusual. The truck's lights receded, leaving a thick cold in its wake. I closed my eyes and leaned against the tire a moment longer, then drew in a deep breath. In that instant I realized my heart was still beating. My blood still pulsed beneath my skin, and my lungs still drew breath. Even in the freezing dead of night, beneath roaring exhaust, I was alive. I checked my phone. A blank screen, no messages from Andrew, no replies from Michael. Only one unread email, subject line, "Re-Friday plans." From Jessica, my best friend in Chicago. I hadn't replied after the disastrous meeting. My chest tightened with guilt, but then a small spark of hope flickered. Someone still cared about me even when I was broken. I inhaled again, closed my eyes and reopened them. The pain was still there, but just a bit smaller. I told myself, I can't stay here forever. I shifted, pushing myself upright though my legs trembled. I pulled my coat tight and wiped my face dry. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but standing on that curb, staring into the distant lights, I knew I'd hit rock bottom, and from rock bottom there's only one way to go. Up. I silently vowed to myself I would find the pieces of my vase, mend them, and let it shine once more. When I climbed back into the car and closed the door, my heart skipped a tentative beat, and I knew that tomorrow would be different. But first, I needed to close my eyes, let the night pass, and find a new spark of hope within me. I woke up the next morning to a text message that glowed like a lifeline on my cracked screen. Jessica, just saw the company announcement, sending you $500, 0 cents. Maybe it can buy you a latte or two. Call me when you can. It was 7:42 a.m. and the pale dawn light was already creeping through my blinds in the tiny studio apartment I'd rented on Alki Avenue. My body still ached from yesterday's breakdown on the I-5 shoulder, but reading Jessica's words felt like someone had tossed me a rope. $500, 0 cents. Less than a week's groceries, but more than that, it was proof I wasn't alone. I pressed my palms to my face and took a shaky breath. The room smelled faintly of last night's coffee grounds, and the salty tang of Puget Sound carried in on the breeze. I peeled back my quilted throw, swung my legs over the side of the bed, and stared at my phone screen for a long moment before dialing Jess. "Hey," I croaked, surprising even myself. My voice sounded brittle, unfamiliar. Are you okay?" Her tone was all concern and adrenaline. "I saw the memo. They stripped you of the Revivalware project? Oh my God, that's..." "I know," I wiped my eyes. I'm still here. I just can't sit in that cubicle anymore." She paused, then said firmly, "You need fresh air. Meet me at Alki Beach in an hour?" I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "I'll be there." I changed into jeans and my favorite navy windbreaker, snapped a black and white photo of the Seattle skyline from my apartment window, and shoved my phone into my back pocket. At 8:55 a.m., I locked the door behind me and jogged 2 blocks to the bus stop. The crisp morning wind stung my cheeks, but it also cleared the remnants of last night's despair. 20 minutes later, I stepped off the Route 21 and onto the boardwalk that hugs Alki Beach. The tide was low, exposing broad swaths of wet sand that shimmered under a pale pink sunrise. I found Jessica leaning against the railing, sipping an oat milk latte from Cafe Vita. She handed me the second cup without a word. "Thanks," I said quietly, wrapping my fingers around the warm cardboard sleeve. We walked side by side, boots crunching on pea gravel. Seagulls wheeled overhead, and in the distance, a handful of early morning joggers wove past paddleboarding lessons. The sky burned brighter as the sun climbed. Streaks of coral and tangerine ignited the horizon. "I'm so sorry," Jessica began. "I wish I could have been there yesterday." I blew a breath out. "It's not your fault. It was a setup." She nodded. "I know. I talked to my cousin at Slack HQ. He says Claire Donovan's been under pressure from the board. They wanted to cut costs and test you." "Test me?" I repeated, shaking my head. "By sabotaging my files?" "Exactly." Jess kicked at a smooth gray stone. "They figured if you failed, They could sideline you without calling it a breach of trust. Classic politics. I felt a flicker of anger rise in my chest, hot and fierce. I spent 6 months building Revival Ware's marketing model. I burned through 3,200 hours of A/B tests, mapped out 12 user journeys, lined up partnerships with 5 micro-influencers, and they just threw it away. She reached out, squeezing my arm. But you know what? That means they're threatened by you. You're doing something right. Morning light glazed her hair. Her confidence was contagious. I took another sip of latte and let the warmth settle into my belly. The bitterness of the espresso cut through my sadness. We found a bench overlooking the water, a battered teal bench that looked like it had weathered 1,000 storms. I sat and stared out at the ferry slicing through Elliott Bay. "Okay," I said at last. "What's next?" Jessica smiled. "We rebuild. But first, you need a win you own completely." She pulled out an envelope, plain white, heavy stock. I frowned. "What's this?" "Consider it seed money." I opened it and gasped. Inside were 5 crisp $100 0-cent bills. $500 0 cents exactly. Jess had withdrawn them that morning from her account. "I figured you could use some cash to prototype your own side project," she said. My mind raced. "But that's your rent money." "I've got sublets lined up," she said with a shrug. "You're a genius at digital strategy. You deserve a runway." My heart thundered. I folded the bills and tucked them into my windbreaker pocket. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to cover hosting fees, Canva licenses, maybe even Facebook ad spend for a proof of concept campaign. I exhaled, feeling the weight lift slightly. The sun was fully up now and the breeze had a hint of warmth. I could taste salt and optimism in the air. "Let's get to work," I said, and for the first time in days I felt a spark of excitement. That spark became a steady flame over the next 48 hours. I holed up in my favorite corner of Beacon Hill Library, ordering 3 sandwiches and a vitamin water from the cafe downstairs. I sketched out a 1-page plan titled Rebound, digital consultancy offering rapid turnaround social media audits and micro-campaigns for early-stage startups. I mapped out a pricing model. Bronze package, $150. 30 minutes audit plus top 3 recommendations. Audit plus 1 week of ad management, up to $100 0 cents ad spend. Audit plus 2-week ad management, plus influencer outreach. I created mock-ups in Canva, drafted copy for my new Instagram page, at Rebound Seattle, and even had $125 0 cents left over for a weekend boost on meta ads targeting Seattle area entrepreneurs. Meanwhile, I leaned on the lessons I'd learned at Grandma's table: authenticity, empathy, and clear communication. My hero story in the About section wasn't a sleek corporate bio, it was the raw version. 30-year-old digital strategist who got betrayed, got rocked, and is now on a mission to help others bounce back faster. By Sunday, I'd spent 2 hours on a Zoom call with my first client lead, a ceramic mug startup in Ballard that wanted help promoting their new eco line. They agreed to the bronze package, $150 0 cents in the bank, a small but meaningful vote of confidence. I counted the cash in my pocket. $625. 0 cents so far. Enough to pay April's rent with $25, 0 cents left over for a celebratory latte. But more importantly, I'd traded paralysis for purpose. That evening, I closed my laptop and walked back to Alki Beach for a mandatory sunset break. The sky was smeared with lavender and gold, waves curled gently onto the shore. I sat on the same teal bench with an iced matcha from Cafe Umbria, watching the last sliver of sun dip beneath the Olympic mountains. I thought about Claire Donovan's smug face, about the board's maneuvering, and then I thought about Jessica's smiling eyes, about the ceramic mug founder's gratitude, about the strangers who would soon discover Rebound Digital. I realized something profound. Recovery isn't a passive process, it's an act of creation, building something new from the wreckage of the old. I took out my phone and typed into my draft Instagram caption. Yesterday, I hit rock bottom. Today, I'm launching Rebound Digital, a boutique agency for founders who need to bounce back stronger than ever. First offer, bronze audit for $150, 0 cents. DM me at Reborn for details. I pressed share, and just like that, my recovery spark became a beacon. The post got 12 likes in the first 10 minutes, my DMs pinged with questions, and I felt the familiar thrill of connection. As I watched the last twilight fade, I whispered to myself, "This is just the beginning." And in that moment, cradled by the rhythmic hush of Pacific waves, I knew that no amount of sabotage, no boardroom betrayal could extinguish the fire I'd just reignited within me. The real Revivalware project could wait, because right now I was rebuilding something even stronger, my own future. I sat at my makeshift desk in the corner of a Capitol Hill co-working space, the glow of my laptop illuminating a chaotic spread of notebooks and printouts. Exactly 1 week had passed since Claire Donovan publicly stripped me of the Revivalware project, and in that time I'd built Rebound Digital from scratch, landed my first $150 0 cents bronze audit, and begun to taste hope again. But now, fueled by a quiet fury, I was ready to turn the tables. I opened Slack and navigated to the private channel Andrew had mentioned, Emily_J_confidential. There it was, one unread message dating back to June 8 at 9:03 a.m. A 10-page draft contract for G-Force Technologies pledging $75,000 0 cents, signed C. Donovan. Attached were 2 files, revival_draft_v2pf and Donovan_signature.pf. My heart pounded as I downloaded both. Side by side on my screen, the contract looked flawless, matching our corporate template down to the pixel, but the signature bore jagged edges, like a copy and paste job. I cross-checked it against Claire's genuine signature from our intranet. The real D looped smoothly, whereas the forged one stuttered. Someone had deliberately doctored her signature and slipped the fake contract into my workspace to frame me. Heart racing, I pieced together the timeline. On June 6, we'd finalized the genuine contract. On June 7, Andrew posted the forged version. On June 8, it appeared under my credentials. And on June 10, the board canceled my project. I drafted an executive summary clearly outlining the forgery, the risk of legal exposure to G-Force Technologies, and a recommendation to reinstate the project under my leadership. Then I messaged Jessica, asking her to arrange an urgent board call. Within minutes, she sent a Zoom invite labeled Board Evidence Review for 3 p.m. that afternoon. Between coffee refills and frantic note-taking, I printed high-resolution copies of both signatures, annotated the pixel-level differences, and organized every piece of evidence. At 2:45 p.m., I settled into a small meeting room, my laptop connecting me to 4 faces on the screen: Bennett, the lean finance veteran; Harrison, a former tech CEO turned board advisor; Marta, from HR; and, to my astonishment, Claire Donovan herself, her chair ominously empty behind the I cleared my throat and launched into my presentation. side-by-side comparisons of the signatures, metadata proving when each file was downloaded, and a concise timeline of how the forgery had led directly to the project's cancellation. Claire's composure cracked. Her voice trembled as she asked whether I was accusing someone on the executive team of forging her signature. I nodded. Yes, I said, and this puts the company at risk of a breach of contract claim for $75,000 plus reputational damage. Bennett exchanged a look with Harrison, and I realized the tide was turning. When Harrison asked if I still wished to lead Revivalware, I seized the moment. I explained that I had secured a verbal commitment from Modern Living, $150,000 investment for a 2-phase rollout beginning July 1, and Jessica confirmed the signed letter of intent moments before. The board fell silent at the news. A Series A-level commitment in the current market was extraordinary. Bennett turned to Claire, reallocating that $75,000 back to Emily and honoring the Modern Living commitment makes financial and reputational sense. Claire exhaled. Emily, I am deeply sorry. If you'll have me, I want Revivalware reinstated under your leadership and Andrew removed from the project chain of command. By 4:30 p.m., the board had voted unanimously to reinstate the project with its original $75,000 budget, place full authority back in my hands, launch an internal forgery investigation with Andrew suspended, and proceed with the $150,000 agreement with Modern Living. As the Zoom call ended, I let the news sink in. I had reclaimed everything I'd lost. And more. Within minutes, I received a call from Modern Living's CMO confirming they would sign the contract by Friday. That evening, I drafted an internal email to the marketing department. Revivalware was officially backed by a $75,000 budget and a fresh $150,000 commitment, and I called the team to a kickoff meeting at 9 a.m. the next morning. Slack reactions flooded in from colleagues who had followed my ordeal. Stepping out onto the rooftop terrace of the co-working space, I drank in the glittering Seattle skyline, the Space Needle, ferries gliding across Elliott Bay, the bustling Purple Line train below. I closed my eyes and let the cool air wash over me, feeling the weight of betrayal lift. Exposing the forgery and securing our funding had been victory, but reclaiming my agency was triumph. As I made my way downstairs to celebrate with Jessica and close friends at a nearby tapas bar, I realized that turning the tables had been more than a counterattack. It was a transformation of adversity into opportunity. The industry would soon hear how Emily Johnson had not only bounced back, but had uncovered boardroom subterfuge, rebuilt her credibility, and turned a $75,000 setback into a $150,000 triumph. And for me, this was just the beginning of a much greater story. I'm Jessica Reed, Emily's college roommate and now her closest ally, and I still remember the night she called me from that icy highway shoulder. I'd been scrolling through emails at my apartment in Chicago overseeing content strategy for a mid-sized tech blog, when her name lit up my screen at 2:17 a.m. EM. Jess, I need help. Within 30 minutes, I'd wired her $500.00 and booked the earliest flight I could find, convinced that nothing would stop her from rising again. Watching her prototype rebound digital in Beacon Hill Library reminded me of her senior thesis days at UW. Back then, she spent 120 hours refining a single slide deck and landed a $5,000 grant from the Entrepreneurship Lab. Fast forward 6 months, and I can hardly believe what she's achieved. Last week, I hosted Emily's first workshop, Bounce Back Better, at a boutique space in Soho, New York. We'd booked a 1,200 square foot loft with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Bowery, rented 50 folding chairs, and sent invitations to 250 startup founders via Eventbrite. When the doors opened at 6 p.m., 120 attendees flooded in, 80% women, each clutching notebooks and lattes from Blue Bottle. I watched Emily step onto the stage under warm Edison bulbs, her PowerPoint titled Pivot, Persist, Prevail, and felt a thrill of pride. She delivered 3 actionable frameworks for rapid digital recovery, anchored by her own data, how she boosted Rebound Digital from $0 to $1,500 in revenue within 72 hours, scaled to $3,200 by week 2, and secured a waitlist of 45 potential clients by week 3, all while juggling client calls and a 3 a.m. wake-up call for Pacific time. The room's energy was electric. Attendees nodded along, tapped notes at 120 words per minute, and peppered her with questions about micro-influencer outreach and low-budget A/B testing. By the end of the 90-minute session, 42 founders had signed up for her silver and gold packages, translating into $12,600 in bookings before she even left the stage. The feedback form scored an average of 4.8 out of 5 for clarity, and one attendee wrote, "Emily's honesty about her lowest point made me feel seen. Her tactical steps gave me hope I can rebuild too." After the workshop, I grabbed Emily's elbow as she stepped off stage. Her eyes were bright with adrenaline and she whispered, "Jess, this is everything." I looked around at the group forming a line for one-on-ones, at the startup founders chatting over charcuterie platters, and I knew she'd done more than just present. She'd built a community. Here's my bonus insight for anyone watching Emily's journey. Resilience isn't passive, it's engineered. Emily's secret sauce combines quantified vulnerability. She tracks her weekly win/loss ratio in a shared Google Sheet, with a lean startup mindset. Her bronze, silver, gold framework tests market appetite at each price point. She leverages micro milestones like hitting $150 subscribers to sustain momentum. And she always sends the elevator back down, offering free 15-minute discovery calls to workshop attendees, which converts at a remarkable 27% rate. So, if you're feeling stuck after a setback, take 3 notes from Emily's playbook. Document your low points honestly. Map out your recovery in 3 quantifiable phases and cultivate a support squad that banks small wins. And if you want more deep dive tips on bootstrapping a comeback in under 2 weeks, drop a comment below or DM me already for a free strategy checklist. Trust me, if Emily can rebuild a 6-figure trajectory from the ashes of a sabotaged project, you can turn your own crisis into your next breakthrough. I never imagined I'd feel any remorse for Claire Donovan, the woman who'd ripped apart my career and nearly broken my spirit. Yet as I sat in the boardroom 2 days after reinstating Revivalware, watching the fallout from the forgery scandal, a strange mix of vindication and pity washed over me. It began with an anonymous tip to legal. Someone forwarded a copy of my executive summary and the side-by-side signature comparison to the general counsel, complete with timestamps and metadata. Within hours, HR launched a formal inquiry. I watched from my corner office as Claire's calendar invitations disappeared. Her access to executive email threads was revoked, and her personal assistant started redirecting her calls. The once unstoppable CEO, always impeccably styled in tailored suits and 4-inch heels, now moved through the halls with her signature poise, replaced by a wary caution. By the next morning, the rumor mill was in full swing. I heard security whispering in the elevator banks. Claire was under investigation for misconduct. Finance murmured about potential legal exposure. Not just the $75,000 0 cents breach of contract with GeForce Technologies, but also accusations of conspiracy to defraud shareholders by misrepresenting company budgets. Even the coffee baristas on the first floor gave me wary nods, as if they'd suddenly noticed me in a new light. On Thursday at 10 a.m. I received an unexpected calendar invitation. Meeting, Claire Donovan, Office 24A, 11:00 a.m. My heart lurched. Was this a trap? Or was she finally going to own up to what had happened? I spent the next hour rehearsing polite, professional responses, steeling myself for confrontation. At 11 exactly, I knocked on Claire's door. Marta from HR opened it, gave me a sympathetic look, and slipped out. Claire sat behind her polished walnut desk, cheeks pale and eyes rimmed red. She motioned for me to sit. "Emily," she began, her voice uncharacteristically soft, "I want to apologize. For everything. For doubting you, for letting politics override integrity, and for putting you through hell." My throat tightened. I remembered the way she'd coldly torn up my proposal, the way her voice had echoed through that boardroom the day she fired me. Yet now, seeing her so vulnerable, I realized vengeance wasn't what I wanted. "I appreciate your apology," I said, keeping my tone even. "You've already been held accountable." She nodded, tears glistening. Legal and the board, have recommended I step down. I'm officially on leave, pending the investigation's outcome. I'm also relinquishing my stock options and covering the cost of the settlement with GeForce Technologies to contain the damage. I pressed my lips together. This was the downfall I'd longed to see. Claire, stripped of power, reputation in tatters, facing potential civil and possibly criminal liability. But I also knew that harboring hatred would only weigh me down. "I'm sorry it came to this," I said quietly. "I hope you find a way to learn from it." She exhaled shakily. "I will, and I hope you succeed beyond what you ever imagined." I stood and offered my hand. She hesitated, then accepted. The contact was brief but sincere, a symbolic passing of the torch. When I left her office, Marta intercepted me in the hallway. "The board is drafting a public statement," she explained. "It'll note Claire's resignation and affirm our commitment to ethical leadership. You'll be CC'd on the draft for approval." A week later, the public announcement dropped. Effective immediately, Claire Donovan resigns as CEO amid findings of document forgery and misuse of company funds. The board of directors apologizes to employees, shareholders, and partners for the recent turmoil and pledges full transparency under interim CEO Emily Johnson. The company's stock, which had dipped 12% on the scandal's revelation, rebounded 18% the next day on news of my appointment. Internally, morale skyrocketed. Revivalware's team sent over a celebratory cake adorned with the slogan, "Integrity Wins." My inbox flooded with messages from all levels: junior analysts, senior VPs, even members of the board, thanking me for restoring trust. GeForce Technologies reached out with a formal apology and a new, even larger contract. $100,000 0 cents for an expanded pilot, plus a $25,000 0 cents bonus for the inconvenience. Claire's departure rippled across our industry. Competitors referenced her case in conference panels as a cautionary tale. Recruiters started reaching out to me, offering interviews, board positions, and speaking engagements. Mentors from my UW days wrote congratulatory notes. Even my grandmother called. "I knew you'd turn that broken vase into something more beautiful." Yet for all the triumph, I stayed grounded. I convened my team immediately to announce our next phase, scaling Rebound Revivalware's campaign nationally and launching Rebound Digital's new accelerator program for early-stage founders. In that meeting, I reminded everyone, board members and interns alike, that our strength lay not in titles or budgets, but in integrity, collaboration, and resilience. As for Claire, I never wished her ill. Instead, I hope she uses this forced pause to rediscover purpose beyond power games, because if she does, then perhaps this downfall can become her own turning point. And for me, the lesson is clear. True victory isn't defeating an antagonist, it's rising above betrayal with grace, rebuilding stronger than before, and inviting others to climb with you. Standing on the stage of our newly renovated conference room, I watched the faces of my team, designers, analysts, marketers, and developers, all brimming with anticipation. Behind me, a large screen displayed the words, "Revival Where, New Chapter," illuminated by soft uplights. Just 1 month ago, I was fighting to reclaim a sabotaged project. Today, I was leading our kickoff event for a nationwide campaign backed by $75,000 0 cents in revitalized budget and an additional $100,000 0 cents pilot from G-Force Technologies. As I cleared my throat, I felt the full circle of my journey settle in my chest, replacing any lingering doubt with profound conviction. "Thank you all for being here," I began, my voice steady. "This moment isn't just about budgets or contracts, it's about the values that define us: integrity, resilience, and community." I paused, letting the words land. When I first joined Revival Wear 6 months ago, my vision was simple: to build a brand that championed sustainability and style. But in the process, I faced betrayal so personal it nearly broke me. Yet here we are, stronger than ever because each of you stood by me, believed in the mission, and refused to let adversity define our path. As the presentation shifted to our upcoming calendar regional pop-up stores in Los Angeles and New York, a social media collaboration with 5 eco-influencers, and a partnership with a recycled fabric innovator for next season prototypes, I saw nods of excitement. We had refined our 3-phase growth model, learned from past missteps, and fortified our workflows with audit checkpoints. Every detail, from audience segment analysis to KPI dashboards, had been stress-tested during our Rebound Digital pilot. We'd transformed the volatility of betrayal into a blueprint for agile scaling. After the meeting, colleagues gathered around me with smiles and hugs. Marta from HR said, "I've never seen morale like this since I joined the company." Bennett let out a low whistle. "You've turned what could have been a career-ending scandal into the greatest turnaround story our board has ever seen." Even Claire's successor, interim CEO David Reyes, sent a brief message. "Your leadership has restored our company's spirit. Proud to have you at the helm." Later that afternoon, I returned to my corner office, now adorned with fresh flowers, a framed photo of Grandma and Grandpa at Bellevue, and a small plaque reading, "Integrity Wins." I sat at my desk, opened a blank Word document, and began typing the lessons I wanted to share with our wider community. Lesson 1: Vulnerability breeds connection. I learned the power of sharing my lowest point. Admitting I was betrayed, devastated, and afraid didn't make me weaker, it made my message more human. People connected not to a polished strategist but to someone real enough to admit struggle. Lesson 2: Quantify your comeback. Recovery isn't an abstract concept, it's measurable. By mapping out micro-milestones, first $150 0 cents, in bronze audits, 4,500 waitlist, $100,000 0 cents pilot, I created momentum and data-driven confidence that resonated with investors and partners. Lesson 3: Build your support ecosystem. From Jessica wiring that first $500, 0 cents, to Michael quietly attending my presentations, to tech mentors who offered server credits, every ally reinforced my belief. Cultivate relationships not for what they can give you, but for the mutual trust you can build. Lesson 4. Let integrity be your North Star. When faced with sabotage, I chose evidence over revenge, transparency over secrecy. That choice not only protected my reputation, but elevated the company's. True leadership shines brightest in moments of ethical crisis. Lesson 5. Send the elevator back down. Success has little meaning if you climb alone. Through workshops, free discovery calls, and mentorship calls, I made sure to offer value back to the community that cheered me on. Giving back isn't a checkbox, it's the core of sustainable impact. I leaned back and read over the list. These weren't just bullet points, they were the pillars of my story. Tomorrow, I'd refine them into a blog post titled From Betrayal to Breakthrough, ready to share on LinkedIn and our company newsletter. The headline alone would likely grab attention, but what mattered most was the substance behind it. Before logging off, I scrolled through my personal messages. A notification from Modern Living popped up. They'd approved our revised launch timeline for July 1. Beneath it, a DM from a LinkedIn connection. Emily, would you consider speaking at the Women in Tech Summit this September? I smiled. Public speaking had once terrified me. Now it felt like an opportunity to pay forward what I'd learned. I tapped out a quick acceptance. As the sun set over Elliott Bay, painting the skyline in fiery pinks, I closed my laptop and stood by the window. I thought about the BBQ spill that set everything in motion, the nights on I-5 shoulders, the download of forged contracts, and the triumphant boardroom moment when justice prevailed. Each chapter had its own lesson, its own emotional weight, but they all led me here, to a place where hardship had become fuel for growth. I whispered to myself, this story isn't just mine, it's ours. And with that, I flicked off the desk lamp, ready to step into the next day as Emily Johnson, strategist, survivor, and guardian of integrity. Because in the end, the strongest brand isn't built on flawless victories. It's forged in the fires of adversity and sealed with the unbreakable promise to rise, again and again.